Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into something you probably shouldn't listen to alone. I'm not kidding. Picture a room with no windows, a steel floor so cold it bites your soles, and a fluorescent light that hums just a bit too loud, like it's trying to cover up something breathing beneath it. That's where I was when this whole thing started. You might not survive what you're about to hear. I almost didn't. So before you feel like the mystery needs to be solved right away, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. It keeps the stories coming. Also, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I read every single one, even the ones at 3 a.m. from a dark basement. Especially those. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft noise, and let's get started on tonight's mystery. My shift wasn't supposed to start at midnight. I was supposed to be off, sleeping, maybe binge watching reruns of a cooking show where the chef screams at everyone. Instead, I got a red text on the secured pager. Report to Site 231. Priority level Omega. Now, you hear Omega at the Foundation. You know it's either a containment breach or something worse. And trust me, there's always something worse. I didn't ask questions. I'd learned that questions are like flashlights in a bottomless pit. They only show you how deep things really go. So I showed up. Black van, no windows, 2 guys with guns and no names. I was escorted into what looked like a research station carved into the side of a mountain. Concrete walls with moss in the cracks. The air smelled like ozone and bleach, with a subtle hint of old regrets. They led me past checkpoint after checkpoint. Biometric scans, voice recognition, a retinal scan that actually burned a little, which I'm pretty sure is not standard procedure. The hallway before the room was narrow, almost claustrophobic. The lights flickered, not in that cheap horror movie way, but like they were resisting whatever was on the other side of the door. There were no signs, no numbers, just a massive red triangle with 3 black slashes through it. SCP containment code. That triangle means existence threatening. I asked, half joking, so, what's in the box? The guy closest to me didn't even blink. He just said, the last thing standing between you and the Scarlet King. Now, I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew the name. The Scarlet King. You hear it whispered between long shifts and longer silences. The researchers say it like it hurts to speak out loud. Old tales. Pre-human. Pre-time. A being that doesn't just want to destroy the world. He wants to turn reality inside out and make us watch. I was led to a booth, small, windowless, with only 1 monitor, a microphone, and a red button labeled Emergency Montic Override. No one explained what that meant. An old woman with a clipboard came in. She looked like someone's sweet grandma, if grandma had an eye twitch and a scar that stretched from ear to throat. She placed the clipboard down and said in a voice like gravel soaked in molasses, "Whatever happens, you do not stop Procedure 110 Montic. Ever." I asked what it was. She paused, a long pause. Then, "Don't ask questions unless you're ready to bleed for the answers. Academic debate often centers on the ethics of knowledge acquisition, that there are things we shouldn't pursue. This was my first time understanding that personally. They briefed me in 2 minutes flat. The girl inside, SCP-231-7, needed to be maintained. That was the word they used. Maintained, like a lawn mower, or a cursed amulet. They told me she must never give birth. At this point, I thought it was some biohazard risk. Maybe a mutated organism or a parasitic alien. I wasn't ready for the truth. Not even close. They said I would observe her through the monitor during Procedure 110 Montic. No details. Just, observe. If the feed cut or she moved out of frame for more than 3 seconds. I had to press the red button. Easy enough, I thought, but there was a tremor in my stomach like I'd just swallowed a handful of pennies. I couldn't place it. Maybe it was the way no one looked me in the eyes. Or how one of the guards was quietly reciting Psalm chapter 91 under his breath. Anyway, midnight hit. The door sealed behind me. The feed blinked on. There she was. She looked young. Too young. Barely 18. pale skin that shimmered like candle wax, long dark hair draped across her face. Barely moving, she sat on a cot with her arms crossed over her belly, not protectively, but like she was holding something down. Her eyes, when she glanced up, didn't blink like normal eyes. They paused, like she was manually deciding when to be human. And then I realized she was staring directly into the camera. Directly at me. Now, here's something my granddad used to say when fishing. If a fish ever looks at you like it understands what you are, you get out of that water. I felt that. I felt that stare. It didn't feel like prey. It felt like judgment. 3 minutes in, nothing happened. Then the speaker clicked on. A low-frequency hum filled the room. Somewhere on the other end, a team was beginning procedure 110 Montic. I never saw what happened. Just her reaction. Her hands tensed. Her mouth opened. But she never screamed. She just listened, like she was hearing something the rest of us couldn't. Something ancient and wrong. Somewhere in the building, a light shattered, and I swear I saw her lips move. Not to speak, to count. Backwards. I couldn't sleep after that first shift. I went home. Sure. Well, not home, exactly. More like a foundation safe house with blackout curtains and a fridge that hummed like it was trying to lull me into psychosis. I stared at the ceiling for hours. The number 7 stuck in my brain like gum under a shoe. I wasn't supposed to get attached. That's rule number 1 in containment. But the way she sat there, arms wrapped around her stomach, not in fear, in control, it did something to my head. I kept replaying that one frame where she blinked. Not like a person, like a machine adjusting its aperture. The next day, I was reassigned. Not away, closer. Observations not enough. They said, we need someone in the room. Someone new. Now, you know how in some horror stories, the narrator is just obviously a fool. That was me. I said yes. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I wanted to know what happened at 4 a.m. when they did that procedure no one would describe. Or maybe I just hated myself a little. Academic psychology would argue that humans have an inherent compulsion to witness tragedy firsthand. I think I just didn't want to be left alone with my imagination. So I suited up. Biosuit. 2 layers. 1 needle of atropine in the thigh, just in case. Whatever "in case" meant. They walked me to the room. No windows. Just a steel door with a rotating lock that made the wrong kind of noise, like it wasn't built to keep people out, but to keep something else in. Inside, it was quiet. No screaming. No glowing red eyes. Just her. She was sitting cross-legged on the mattress, staring at the wall. There was a worn-out teddy bear beside her. Its left eye was missing. When she turned her head, her hair made that dry rustling sound, like paper sliding across old bones. I cleared my throat. Ah, hello. She didn't respond, but she looked at me. Again, not into my eyes, through them, like I was a window, or a mirror someone had covered in fog and thumbprints. They had warned me not to touch her, not to speak unless she spoke first, and never, never, mention her pregnancy. I sat down in the observation chair and tried not to look at her stomach. But I did. Of course I did. And it wasn't round like a normal pregnancy. It shifted, like something inside was changing shape just to mess with me. The weird part, no one talked about it. Not the guards. Not the researchers. It was like they had collectively agreed not to even acknowledge that bump under her hospital gown. It made me think of a quirky bit of trivia I once read. In Victorian times, people used to put bells on graves in case the dead woke up, a literal panic button for accidental burials. I wondered if anyone ever thought to do that for the womb, to warn us before something comes out wrong. Anyway, I sat there for an hour. Her breathing was steady, too steady, like she had rehearsed each inhale for an audience she couldn't see. Then something shifted. The lights dimmed, even though there were no dimmer switches. My earpiece buzzed. Someone whispered, 30 seconds to Montic. I looked over. She was smiling. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile you give when a secret becomes too heavy and you're just grateful someone else is about to carry it. Her hands tightened on the mattress. The humming started again, that same low tone from the previous night. It vibrated in my ribs. But I was in the room now. And I felt it. Something ancient, something angry, something that didn't understand language but understood intent. And we had bad intent. We had turned ritual into routine, and she knew. The room trembled, not violently, just enough for the dust in the corners to swirl. And she exhaled, one long, slow breath. Her pupils expanded, swallowing the iris. And then she spoke. Only one word. Again. And I swear to whatever gods might still be awake at this hour, the temperature dropped by 15 degrees. The walls sweated. And I understood, for the first time, what it meant to be prey. The procedure ended. I don't know what they did. They wouldn't let me stay for that part. I was escorted out before 4:01. But I caught a glimpse of one of the staff members coming out afterward. She was crying, and her hands were red to the wrists. She held a piece of paper with a blood-stamped symbol that looked like a crown made of teeth. Nobody explained anything. They just said, "See you tomorrow." That night, I dreamed I was inside her room again. Only this time, the cot was gone. She was standing, floating maybe, in a sea of writhing shadows. Her belly was glowing, not metaphorically. I mean literally radiating this pulsing, golden red light. And her eyes were a mirror. In the reflection, I saw myself. And I was smiling. Some old monks believed silence was the loudest form of prayer. I never understood that until I sat in a room where no one said the word pregnant. Even though it echoed in every heartbeat. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, humming that tone under my breath without realizing. It had rhythm, like a heartbeat, or a countdown. I started asking questions. Stupid move. I know. Curiosity doesn't just kill the cat. It usually gets the intern fired. Or worse, reassigned to Keter class mock duty. But there's a moment, right after your third sleepless night, when your brain starts whispering that you deserve to know. And that whisper, it sounds a whole lot like your own voice. So I cornered one of the nurses during the handover shift. Mid-30s, tired eyes, wedding ring she spun when she got nervous. I asked what procedure 110 Montic actually was. Her hands froze on the clipboard. Then she did something weird. She looked up at the ceiling, as if afraid the building itself might be listening. "You don't want to know," she said. "Trust me, you'll sleep better. That ship sailed 2 nights ago." I told her. She bit her lip and said, very softly, "Just be glad it's still working." Now, that word, working, stuck in my head like a splinter. Because that implies something has a function, a purpose, a goal. So if the procedure works, what's it actually stopping? That's when I got access to the redacted file. You know, the one with most of the words blacked out and the warnings written in capital letters. Even the file felt hostile, like it didn't want to be read. But I pieced some of it together. The girl, SCP-231-7, is the last surviving vessel from something called the Daughters of the King. Yeah, that king, the Scarlet King. And here's the kicker. Procedure 110 Montic isn't about curing her. It's not even about helping her. It's about stopping the birth. Every day at exactly 4 a.m., the Foundation subjects her to a ritual that, in layman's terms, resets the gestation process. Keeps the fetus in a suspended state. 1 second late, one misstep, and we don't get another chance. There's no way to sugarcoat this. What we do to her is horrific. And we do it because the alternative is worse. I didn't believe it at first. I thought maybe the Foundation had just gone full cult mode on this one. You'd be surprised how often that happens. But then I saw it for myself. Not the ritual. I was never cleared for that. But I saw her after. Her face was calm. Too calm. Imagine someone just finished running a marathon and then sat perfectly still. Breathing evenly. No sweat. That's how she looked. The guards left. I stayed behind to monitor her vitals. That's when she turned to me and asked, clear as day, "Do you know what a fetus dreams of?" I blinked. "Excuse me, they dream of what they will become," she said, "but he dreams of what already was." She smiled, slow and sad. That's why we're all so afraid of the dark. Some part of us remembers the before. Now, I don't know about you, but that's the kind of sentence that makes you Google therapy at 3 a.m. She looked down at her belly then, and I could swear, I saw it move. Not kick, not shift, it turned inside her, like it was rolling over to listen better. There's an old saying that the devil doesn't knock. He's already inside when you start hearing the knock. I think whoever wrote that had met her. I filed a request to transfer. It was denied. Instead, I got promoted. They said I had a calming effect on SCP-231-7. Translation: she didn't scream when I was in the room. I don't know if that's a compliment or a death sentence. Anyway, the next week, we got a new researcher on site. Fresh from SITE 19. Cocky, young, thought this whole Scarlet King thing was exaggerated. Said it sounded like something from a tabletop roleplay game. On his first day, he joked, "So what happens if she does give birth? We all get turned into pumpkins." No one laughed. That night, his fingernails peeled off one by one while he was asleep. No explanation, no medical cause, just gone. He was gone by morning. Some said he requested transfer. Others said he was claimed. Now, here's a strange little fact. Turtles can breathe through their butts. Completely unrelated, I know, but for some reason, that's what I thought of when I stood in the observation booth the next morning, staring at her through the glass. Maybe my brain was grasping at any scrap of normalcy. She looked up, met my eyes, and said something I will never forget. "I don't want him to be born either." And I knew, in that moment, she wasn't the monster. She was the prison. She wasn't holding back a storm. She was the storm's cage. Academic debate often centers on moral thresholds. When does the act of protection become a form of abuse? That thought kept me up that night, especially as I listened to the humming start at 3:59 a.m. like clockwork. I began to understand the horrible truth. We weren't saving the world. We were buying time, one bloody minute at a time. And we were running out of minutes. You ever hear a rumor so strange, so obviously made up, that it sticks with you anyway? Like a song lyric you hate but hum in the shower. That's what happened with the pregnancy theory. It wasn't in the official logs, but people whispered it in the elevator, passed it over coffee in the security lounge like a cursed chain letter. They said she was pregnant. Not with something, but as something. Let me explain. Most people think of pregnancy as carrying a child. But the idea here, the girl wasn't the vessel. She was the ritual made flesh. A container formed from flesh, fear, and fate. Her pregnancy didn't have a father, it had a source. The source was hate. I overheard one of the older researchers say it in hushed tones. The Scarlet King doesn't reproduce the way we understand it. He imposes. He places his will inside reality like a hook in the gut of existence. Yeah, light breakfast conversation. So what does that mean for the girl? Well, it means she's not growing a baby. She's growing a breach. I was back in the room. No cameras this time, just a chair, a notebook, and a live vitals feed softly blinking beside the cot. I noticed something off. Her heart rate flatline for exactly 17 seconds. Then it came back, steady as before. I called the med team, but they brushed it off. Glitch in the system, they said, old wires. But I saw her during that moment. Her eyes wide open, staring straight at me, like her soul had momentarily left her body and come back with company. When I told my supervisor, he muttered a phrase I didn't understand at the time. Phase shifts accelerating. He wouldn't explain, but I knew something had changed. A few nights later, I was alone on the night watch. You'd think a place like Site 231 would have more people walking the halls at 2 a.m. But no, the opposite. No one liked being here after midnight. There were less rules in the dark, and even fewer explanations. That's when I heard the scream. It wasn't human, not quite. It started soft, like a record being scratched, then rose into something jagged and full of intent. Not pain, not fear, desire. I ran toward it, but the halls started doing that thing they do when containment gets shaky. where your footsteps echoed twice and the walls feel like they're pressing in just slightly every few seconds. I found the source. Her door. She wasn't screaming, she was singing, softly, a lullaby, in a language that didn't have vowels, just vibrations. It made my gums itch. The vitals monitor was still running, but it showed two separate heartbeats. One, steady, the other, slower, stronger, bigger. There's a piece of old-world wisdom from pre-Islamic mythology, the idea that evil doesn't emerge from chaos, but from too much order. When things are too still, too silent, that's when the old gods return. I thought about that as I sat by the door, listening to a song that wasn't for me, but was about me, because I finally understood the real horror. She wasn't a victim, she wasn't even scared, she was preparing. I went back to the logs, dug deep, not the stuff in the system, the handwritten files, the accidentally unshredded memos from the early days. That's when I found it. The story of the others. There were 6 before her. SCP-231 1 through 231-6. Girls. All of them. Found in the same remote region of the Middle East. Surrounded by symbols scorched into the ground. Ritual marks. 7 points. 1 star. All bleeding. Each girl was captured and contained. Each one either died or disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Every time one died, the same global spike occurred. Mass miscarriages. Sea levels rising by exactly 1 centimeter overnight. Untraceable seismic pulses originating from what can only be described as beneath tectonic plates. So they stopped letting them die. 231-7 was the last. The only one who didn't scream during intake. The only one who looked her captors in the eye and said, "You're late." Here's something completely unrelated and weird. Flamingos bend their legs backward, because what looks like their knee is actually their ankle. That image haunted me while watching her walk the room in circles one night. Her body moving like her bones were built in reverse. At one point, she stopped, faced the camera, and whispered, "Are they telling you the truth? Or just buying your silence with ignorance?" And the feed cut out for 4 seconds. When it came back on, she was sitting exactly where she was before, like she had never moved. But I knew what I'd seen. The chair was still warm. I asked again about Procedure 110 Montic. This time, someone told me more. It's not a medical procedure. The Level 4 supervisor whispered, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. It's not even physical. I waited. It's spiritual. And then he dropped the real bomb. It doesn't just keep the pregnancy suspended, it keeps him locked out. That's why the ritual has to be repeated daily. Not for her, for us. Because if it ever stops, if she ever gives birth, metaphorically or literally, he doesn't crawl into our world. He is our world, and it reboots around him. That night, I sat outside her room, watched the clock. 3:58 a.m. 3:59 a.m. 4 a.m. The humming started, and from the other side of the wall, I heard her say, very softly, "I think I'm almost ready." You ever stand in a hallway and feel like the floor is trying to remember something? That was Site 231 the next morning. The walls weren't whispering yet, but they were, expecting. The air had that pressure before a thunderstorm wait, and the coffee tasted like rusted pennies and warning signs. I kept trying to convince myself I was overthinking it, that maybe the room was just getting to me, that maybe I was just tired. But tired people don't hallucinate the past. Because that's what started happening. The first time was during my lunch break. I sat in the far corner of the staff room, where the vending machines buzz louder than your thoughts. I blinked, and for a moment, I wasn't in the cafeteria. I was in a desert. The sand was bleeding, literally. The grains ran red in streaks under my boots. And I could hear chanting, not from outside, but from below. I turned, and there they were, 7 girls, chained at the wrists, walking in a slow circle around a pit. A red sun hung overhead, pulsing like a wound, and in the center of the pit, something watched. It didn't move, didn't speak, but I knew it saw me. I blinked again, and I was back, holding a half-eaten protein bar, heart racing, mouth dry. No one noticed. Everyone around me just kept scrolling their phones. I didn't say a word. Not then. But I knew. These weren't just dreams. This was inheritance. I went to the archive. Again, I needed to know about the 6 girls before her. Nobody talks about them, but their numbers still hang over the site like forgotten names on a tombstone. SCP-231-1 died during intake. SCP-231-2 procedure failed. Gave birth to entity classified, site sealed, staff lost. SCP-231-3 suicide. SCP-231-4 vanished from sealed chamber. Video shows containment door open on its own. SCP-231-5 spoke in tongues until her mouth bled. Procedure continued. Eventually, she stopped speaking. SCP-231-6 did not resist. That was the report's exact wording. She did not resist, and somehow, that was worse. Each one had a different response to Procedure 110 Montauk. Each one deteriorated, some mentally, some physically, and each death brought us closer to something no one wanted to put on paper. That's how I learned the truth. The girls weren't chosen randomly. They were designed, birthed not by chance, but by force, by ancient rituals long erased from written language. Selected to carry fragments of an entity that predates concepts like mercy or time. And only one remained, the 7th. Old Sumerian prophecy talks about the last womb, the one that cannot be broken but must be bound. That's how I started seeing her, not as a girl, not even as a person, but as a lock we were torturing daily in the hopes the key would never fit. But here's the thing, locks rust. They crack, even the strongest ones. And I started noticing her changes. She was humming again, always the same tune, low, guttural, rhythmic. It sounded like a slowed down version of a child's lullaby mixed with the hum of a machine starting to overheat. And she was growing. Not just her stomach, her shadow. I first saw it during a maintenance sweep. The light flickered, just for a second. But the shadow stayed, didn't flicker, didn't shift. It moved independently. When I told a senior technician, he shrugged. Lighting anomaly, ignore it. But he didn't come in the next day. Transferred. Or that's what they said. There's a phrase in old theological texts, she who carries him bears no light. That line repeated in my head over and over as I watched her walk the perimeter of her room in slow, deliberate steps, dragging her fingertips along the wall like she was measuring something. And then one day, she looked at me and said, "I miss my sisters." Her voice was normal, human, sad. I said nothing. She continued, "I remember them now. Not their faces, their screams." And she smiled, not cruelly, like someone remembering a home they can never return to. Here's a weird science fact for you. Octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood. They die shortly after mating because the biological stress is too much for their systems. I thought about that when she pressed her hand to her belly and whispered, "He's almost strong enough now." Like she knew she wasn't going to survive what was coming. Like she was designed to break. Academic debate in theological epistemology suggests that some entities can only be understood by proximity, that you can't study God without becoming slightly mad from the effort. I think that's what was happening to all of us at Site 231. We were going mad, quietly, efficiently, in well-sterilized hallways with clipboard checklists and daily logs. One day at a time. That night, something changed in her room. The camera feed jittered, just for a moment. When it came back, she was standing in the middle of the room, arms raised, palms open. There was a symbol on her skin, one that hadn't been there before, like it had grown out of her. 3 intersecting lines with a circle in the center. I later learned it matched ancient carvings found beneath a ruined temple in western Iran. A temple sealed in concrete after an entire archaeology team disappeared. She looked at the camera and mouthed a word. I couldn't hear it, but I felt it, right in the back of my skull, like a hand curling around a candle. And just like that, she turned away. And the light in her room flickered red. I used to think the foundation was about control. You know, contain, protect, that whole motto. But after 6 weeks at Site 231, I understood something deeper. We don't control anything here. We distract it, we appease it, and most of all, we stall it. That morning, the senior researcher snapped. Just snapped. He was a quiet guy. Glasses. Always smelled like cinnamon gum and printer ink. The kind of man who blended into hallways and never spoke unless asked directly. But that day, he walked into the central atrium during briefing, holding his laptop in one hand and a journal in the other. Screaming, "We're feeding her to the wrong god." The room froze. No one moved. I don't even think anyone blinked. Security didn't react, not at first, because something about the tone, something in the certainty of his voice, cut through all the years of protocol. Like he wasn't guessing. He knew. He dropped the journal on the table. I was close enough to grab it. Inside, handwritten pages, mostly symbols, drawn in pen, ink, sometimes blood, but in between were notes, all addressed to the last gate. That was her, SCP-231-7. One phrase was repeated over and over. She is not the key. She is the final door. And he is already on the threshold. Security finally moved. Tranquilizer darts. Full takedown. They dragged him off mid-rant. His last words, "Do you feel it yet? The ground remembering its blood." The next day, we were all required to undergo psychological evaluation. Standard stuff. Ink blot tests. Memory quizzes. Mood logs. But something felt different. We were being watched more closely. Not like usual, where they observe for safety. This time, they were afraid we might already be compromised. I tried to bury myself in routine. Meal prep, reports, guard rotations. But when you're watching someone who's possibly carrying the seed of cosmic annihilation, routine starts to look like a really fragile band-aid on a gaping wound. Every night at 4 a.m., Procedure 110 Montic ran like clockwork. But I noticed something. Each time, she looked less human. It wasn't just her movements. It was her presence. Like she took up more space than her body should allow. Her shadow grew longer. Her voice, when she spoke, came with an echo, one I couldn't trace to any surface. And her eyes, they stopped blinking. Just stopped. Here's a strange little fact to lighten the mood. The human body has enough iron in it to make a 3-inch nail. Cute, right? Now imagine standing next to someone whose unborn child could forge a crown from that iron. Shape it with intent, and wear it as its name. Yeah, no one was laughing. At 3:17 a.m., the fire alarms went off. No fire, no smoke, just noise. The hallway lights flickered. The locks disengaged for 1.2 seconds. That doesn't sound like much, but it was enough. When we reached her room, she was standing, not pacing, not sitting, standing, hands at her sides, eyes wide. The cot was gone, literally gone, like it had never existed. In its place, a pool of dark fluid, thick, tar-like, smelled like copper and thunderstorms. She didn't look at us. She looked up, and whispered, "He's learning to dream in colors." That's when one of the guards dropped his rifle and started sobbing. The official report said, "Containment event resolved. No breach occurred." But that's not what happened. Because that night, I had the dream again. Only this time, I wasn't watching the ritual in the desert. I was performing it. I stood in a circle with 6 others, figures in hooded robes. Faceless, featureless, and in the center, the girl, bleeding from the palms, holding her belly, and all of us were chanting, "Let the seal hold, let the pain burn, let the child forget its name." Except, one voice was missing. The 7th. I woke up gasping, with the taste of sand in my mouth. Literal grains. In my teeth. I spit them into the sink and stared at the mirror for an hour. At some point, I whispered, "Do you know what I'm doing here?" And from behind the mirror, something whispered back, "Yes, they say memory is unreliable. That you can misremember entire events. Confuse dreams for truth. But what if the dream is more consistent than the waking world? What if the dream is the original? and everything else is the glitch. Academic debate in metaphysics often challenges the notion of linear time, that the past, present, and future exist simultaneously. That would explain why I started seeing the other girls. SCP-231 1-6. Walking the halls. Not ghostly, not hallucinations. Presences. They nodded as I passed. Never spoke, but one touched my shoulder once. And when she did, my nose bled, and I remembered something that hadn't happened yet. The delivery room, the screaming, the void where my face used to be. The girl, SCP-231-7, finally looked at me again the next day. Really looked at me, and said, "He's decided you'll be the first he forgives." And then she laughed. Just once. Soft, like someone seeing the joke too late. I stopped checking clocks after that. Something about knowing the exact time when the world could end, it loses its charm real quick. Every tick felt like a dare. Every minute after 4 a.m. felt borrowed. Like I was walking through a house that wasn't mine. Touching things I shouldn't. The dreams didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. They weren't just dreams anymore. They were places. I'd lie down for a nap and wake up on the floor of a red cathedral. Impossible architecture stretching out for miles in every direction. The walls were bone. The candles screamed instead of flickering. And somewhere deep inside, a child cried. Not like a baby, not helpless. It cried like it was hungry. One morning, I woke up with red chalk under my fingernails. I don't own chalk, I never did, but the marks were all over my dorm walls, symbols I didn't understand. Some of them moved when I blinked. One of them pulsed when I got too close. I told a level 2 technician. He offered me melatonin. There's a bit of old sailor wisdom that says, when the wind sings, the sea remembers. I think that's true, because the girl started humming again. This time not in her cell. In my head, no matter where I went. Even when the speakers were off. Even when she was asleep. I'd hum it in the shower. Tap it against my steering wheel. And worse, other people started humming it back. Without realizing, the dreams shifted again. This time, I wasn't in the cathedral. I was standing on a bridge made of bones, stretching over an abyss filled with writhing shapes. The wind howled, but not like nature. It howled like it wanted to be heard. And the girl stood across from me, pregnant, glowing. She opened her mouth to speak, but something else spoke through her. Not a voice, a presence. Each contraction is a countdown. Each scream is a syllable of his name. I woke up with blood in my ears and her name on my lips. But here's the problem. Her name isn't meant to be spoken. Not outside of the dream. I tried it once, quietly, in the hallway. The lights above me flickered, and every door I passed unlocked. Just for a second. When I mentioned it to a colleague, he told me something odd. He said he'd seen her, too, not in the cell, in his wife's ultrasound. They don't even have kids. He said the technician showed him the scan and paused. This one looks aware. She'd whispered. They left before the follow-up, and moved to another continent. Academic debate sometimes centers on the concept of egregores, thought forms that become real through collective belief. I began to wonder, was the Scarlet King always real? Or did we make him? By fearing him, by believing in him, by torturing her. Because here's something no one likes to admit at the Foundation: the rituals we use. Most of them are stolen. Scraps of forbidden languages, misremembered gods, broken geometry. We don't understand what we're doing. We're just hoping we got enough pieces in the right order to fool whatever's on the other side. And the problem with rituals? Eventually, they get noticed. I started noticing a smell in the hallway outside her cell. Metallic, like burning copper, and something sweeter underneath, like rotting fruit. No one else seemed to notice it. Or maybe they did and just refused to admit it. That's the thing about fear, it breeds silence. And silence is the Scarlet King's favorite song. Here's your quirky fact for the day. Hummingbirds can remember every flower they've ever visited. Isn't that wild? Now imagine something older than stars remembering every womb it's ever infected. And calling him back. One night, the humming stopped. That was more terrifying than the sound itself. I rushed to the monitors. Static. No signal. The vitals flatlined for 7 seconds. Then spiked. Her heartbeat doubled. The fetal heartbeat tripled. And the room went black. I mean black. Not darkness. Not shadows. Just absence. I got clearance to enter the room. What I found, not her, not the cot, just symbols burned into the floor, fresh, still smoldering, and her voice, echoing from the speakers, even though they weren't powered. I'm dreaming now, but he's awake, and I felt something in my chest, a pressure, like something curled up behind my heart and smiled. I spent the next few days in quarantine. Psychological observation. They said it was protocol. But when I asked what they were observing for, they didn't answer. Instead, they watched me sleep. They don't know I remember the dream from quarantine. They think I forgot, but I didn't. It was a cradle made of ribs. And in it, not a baby, but a mirror. And when I looked into it, I saw my own face. Smiling, wearing a crown made of veins. You ever stare at yourself in the mirror so long your face stops looking like yours? That's been happening to me a lot lately. I'll be brushing my teeth, looking at my reflection, and suddenly I can't remember the name for the shape of my mouth. Or why I have 2 eyes. Or what blinking is for. The psychologists say it's derealization, stress-induced, common in high-stakes environments. But I'm not stressed. I'm becoming familiar. And that's worse. I returned to the chamber on day 52. The cameras were back online. The cot was back, too, so was she. Just different. She sat upright, one hand resting gently on her belly, the other tracing a slow spiral on the sheet. Her hair hung like wet ropes. Her mouth didn't move, but her voice echoed in my head. "You saw him," she said. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She nodded anyway. "He's interested in you. That's rare." I blinked. "Interested how?" She turned to look at me. "You're part of the story now." Now, that right there, that line, that made my stomach flip. The Foundation doesn't deal in stories. It deals in data, protocols, airtight boxes and concrete logic. The moment you realize you're a character in something else's script, you're done. Reality becomes slippery. Choice becomes illusion. You stop being a person and become a motif. She stood up. No guards moved. No alarms. She walked to the far wall and placed her hand on the concrete. "He's closer now. You can feel it, can't you?" I could. Not in my mind. In my teeth. Every molar ached like they were being tuned to a frequency I couldn't quite hear. There's an old Eastern belief that certain teeth connect to certain organs, like if a tooth hurts. It's not the tooth, it's the liver. Makes you wonder what organ aches when your soul is the one under pressure. I reviewed the footage from that night. It shouldn't exist, but it does. 1 minute of silence. She's standing against the wall, humming again, but the audio shows something underneath it. A second frequency, deeper, buried. We ran it through filters. Spectrogram analysis. No results. Then someone tried reversing it. What we heard made 3 agents quit on the spot. Because it wasn't noise. It was speech. A single sentence. "Do not let her name be forgotten." Followed by another. "She is the only thing keeping the door from becoming the house." We scrubbed the files. Burned backups. But that message stuck to our brains like oil. You can't forget something that speaks into you. Later that day, I returned to her room. She didn't speak. She just drew on the wall with her fingernail. Thin scratches. When I looked closely, I realized she was drawing me. My face. Wearing a blindfold made of barbed wire. With something emerging from my chest. Not bursting. Peeling. Academic debate in esoteric anthropology often circles the idea that symbols themselves are alive. That to draw something is to invite it. So when I saw her drawings start to move, very slightly, just enough to notice if you stared long enough, I knew something had already crossed. One night, the ritual was late by 30 seconds. There was a glitch. One of the restraints wouldn't lock. Mechanical error. 30 seconds. Not much. Until the girl spoke in that 30 seconds. In a voice not her own. Not deep. Not angry. Just wrong. I've counted all of you. You're missing one. Then she smiled, and her stomach moved, like a ripple under thick mud. We initiated emergency override. Red button. Full lockdown. Everything went dark. By the time we restored power, she was asleep again, breathing slow, but we all heard the sound in that moment of darkness. A knock. 3 times. Not on her door, on ours, like it knew where we lived. You want something weird? Owls can rotate their necks 270 degrees. Most people know that. What most people don't know is that if you watch one do it too long, you feel like it's looking behind you. That's how I felt every time I turned away from her cell. Like someone was already looking through my eyes. I went back to the old logs again. Found something buried deep. A protocol that was never implemented. Termination clause. SCP-231-7. There were no details, just a simple sentence. In the event of ritual failure or potential breach, subject is to be eliminated immediately to prevent escalation. And underneath, handwritten in red ink. But what happens when the womb dies and the door stays open? That's the thing no one talks about. This isn't about her, it's about what wants out. We're not containing a girl. We're negotiating with a god. That night, I had a new dream. The cathedral again, only now it was empty. No chants, no thrones, just me, holding something swaddled in chains. And a whisper, "You will be his first voice." When I woke up, my mouth hurt. I went to the mirror, opened wide, and in the back, behind my molars, was something new, a tooth that wasn't there before. Sharp, black, like obsidian. I didn't pull it, I couldn't, I just stared at it. And it pulsed. Once. The next time I saw her, she was singing, not humming, not whispering, singing. It wasn't a song I recognized. Not from any language on earth. Anyway, no melody, just a series of notes that circled each other like insects over a flame. Dipping into harmonies that made the walls sweat. Literally, condensation formed on the steel. I wiped my arm across it, and the liquid smeared red. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? How do you explain to your supervisor that steel is weeping blood because a girl without a known father is practicing hymns from before the first atom split? She looked serene, and I hated that. I wanted her to be scared. I wanted her to be confused like the rest of us. But no, she was composed, radiant, almost, as if she knew exactly how far we were from the end and was just waiting for the calendar to catch up. "I saw your dream," she said, as I walked into the room. I froze. "You were holding him," she continued. "You didn't scream." "What was I holding?" I asked. Her smile sharpened, but her lips didn't move. "What comes after the last scream?" There's a phrase I read in an old Indo-Tibetan occult manuscript. The mouth is the last gate. At the time, I assumed it referred to breath, or death, or maybe some mystical notion of release. Now I'm not so sure, because when she spoke next, I felt my jaw ache, my lips twitch, like my mouth was trying to answer back in a voice that wasn't mine. She stood then, just stood, nothing dramatic, but the moment she did, the air around her distorted, like heat waves bending sunlight on the pavement. And the shadow beneath her stretched farther than physics allowed, all the way to me. It touched my boots. I couldn't move. And she said, "He's watching through your eyes now." Let me tell you something my grandmother used to say. Whenever we watched scary movies together, and she loved scary movies, she'd lean in and whisper, "If the monster can see you, it's already inside the house." I never forgot that. And in that moment, I felt it. The house was already inside me. I staggered backward, left the room, didn't say a word. I passed by a guard I'd known for months. Normally stoic. That day, he was shaking. She talked to me. He mumbled. "You too?" I asked. He looked up. No, the thing inside her. I requested a psych eval. They ran the tests. Ink blots, memory recall, emotional regulation. I passed every category with inhuman precision. And that's when I got scared. Because I'd never passed those tests before. Not like this. Quirky fact, Squids have brain cells shaped like donuts. I wish I didn't know that. Because I kept dreaming of spirals. Black, hungry spirals, like ink pulling thoughts downward. And every time I woke up, I was humming that melody again. And smiling. The whispers started after that. First behind walls, then behind my ears, then inside. Not voices, exactly. More like pressure. Thoughts that weren't mine. Questions I'd never ask. Do you think they'll kill her before he arrives? Do you think they even can? What if she's already given birth, and this is just the afterbirth of reality? I stopped sleeping, not because I couldn't, because I didn't trust what I'd wake up as. She greeted me the next morning by name. Not my first name, my full name, the one I haven't spoken aloud since the day I signed the foundation contract. Not even my family uses it. She said it like a prayer. And I felt it respond in me. Like something inside stood up a little straighter. Like I was being called to attention. I checked the feed logs. Her file history. Her surveillance. Every moment since the day she arrived. And I saw it. Something no one noticed. Her eyes. Always aimed at the same corner of the room. The one with the inactive secondary camera. The backup lens that hadn't worked in over 2 years. She looked into it like it was her audience. Like she knew. And then she started counting. At first, it was random. Once in a while during a meal. During routine scans. In the middle of silence. She'd whisper numbers. 11, 9, 6. Sometimes repeated. Sometimes not. But over the last few days, they were descending. Academic debate in occult temporal theory occasionally touches on pre-birth chronotropy. The idea that a child may begin affecting time before it's born. As a function of its potential impact on the timeline. That's not just theory anymore. Because time in her room has started to misbehave. Monitors freeze at random. Audio feeds loop snippets from weeks ago. Her heart rate occasionally displays negative numbers. We don't know what that means. And no one wants to be the first to ask. That night, I heard a knock on my door. Not the apartment door, the closet. Just once. I opened it. Empty. Except for one thing. A scrap of her hospital gown. Soaked in something that wasn't blood. And the number, 5, written in it. Not on it. In it. Like the fabric had been dyed with time. The walls are breathing now. I don't say that metaphorically. They move. When I place my hand on the concrete outside her containment room. I feel a slow inhale. And a slower exhale, warm, rhythmic, like the building itself is syncing with whatever's growing inside her. No one talks about it. They avoid that hallway now. Pretend it doesn't exist. We've started calling it the vein zone, unofficially, of course. Not because it's red, but because if you stand there long enough, you start to hear it pulse. Last night, during routine checks, she whispered, 4, into the air and giggled. Giggled. It wasn't a child's laugh. Or a woman's. It was the sound you'd make if you remembered a joke someone told you before you were born. And it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for someone else. Later, I sat outside her room reviewing a report. Nothing unusual, just baseline vitals. When I looked up at the monitor, she was gone. I don't mean absent from the bed. I mean, gone. Blank footage. Empty cell. I hit the manual refresh. Same. I called in a level 2 check. They rebooted the feed, and there she was. Back on the cot, head tilted, looking directly into the camera, right into my eyes. And her lips moved. I can leave anytime I want. They installed a secondary failsafe. An automatic neurotoxin dispenser embedded in the ceiling. Set to trigger if procedure 110 Montic ever fails again. They didn't ask her permission. But she knows. That night, she sat upright and said, "Tell them I'm not afraid to die. Tell them they should be. Old folklore says mirrors are portals. You cover them during funerals so souls don't get lost." I used to think that was poetic. Until I caught my own reflection smiling when I wasn't. It happened in the site bathroom. Flickering lights. I was brushing my teeth. Trying to feel human. And then I looked up. And my reflection didn't blink. Didn't move. Just stared. Then mouthed one word. 3. I smashed the mirror. Bloodied my knuckles. The glass pulsed once before dying. Security filed it as stress response. I didn't correct them, but I noticed the fragments. Every shard showed her face. Different expressions. All of them, waiting. I stopped dreaming around this time. Instead, I started remembering things I've never lived. Walking across deserts with chains in my hands. Standing beneath a sky so red it burned my skin. Holding something wrapped in cloth that squirmed. I began to think the dreams weren't hers. They were his. Memories passed down like inheritance. Like warnings. Or invitations. Academic discussions around ontological bleed-through often warn of memory corruption between observers and anomalous entities. In layman's terms, if you look at it too long, it starts looking back. That's what's happening to me. To all of us. There's a buzzing in my ears now. Constant. Like a mosquito that knows your secrets. But it's not random. It's a voice. Layered too deep to catch clearly. Until yesterday, I heard it behind my left ear. Right as I passed her door. Just one sentence. The house is nearly ready. Something is happening in the concrete. The walls are developing, marks. Faint at first. Then clearer. Patterns. Symbols. Identical to the ones drawn in her blood during Procedure 110 Montic. They're not being drawn by her. They're emerging, like bruises. Or birthmarks. Fun fact. Sea cucumbers can eject their own organs to confuse predators. It's a self-defense mechanism. I bring this up because it occurred to me, what if she is doing the same? What if everything around her, the walls, the guards, me, is just something she's already ejected? Distractions. Bait. While the real her waits somewhere deeper. That night, I found writing on my apartment wall. Not painted. Etched. It said, I live alone. I don't own a knife. The humming is back. Now it's in the elevator. The vending machine. The radio static in the rec room. Every channel, every frequency. Same tune. Same pattern. Same message. She's not just influencing the site. She's tuning it, like an orchestra before a final note. They upgraded her threat level. Keter Plus. Contingency Alpha Black considered. And yet, nobody wants to pull the trigger. Because there's a theory, one too terrible to confirm, that if we end her too early, we become the cradle. The world itself turns into the womb. And he grows faster. She stared into the camera again this morning. Smiling, not mocking, peaceful, like someone who knows the book is almost finished. And whispered, I didn't show up for work today. Didn't check in. Didn't log my biometric at the main gate. And no one called. Not even once. That's when I realized something's changed. Not just in her room. Or the site. Or the walls. But everywhere. They're not watching us anymore. Because they don't need to. I stayed in my quarters. Curtains drawn. Blackout tape over every light. I even unplugged the fridge because the hum had started syncing with her melody again. But even in the dark, I could feel it, the pull. Like gravity with a voice. Like guilt soaked in static. I flipped through my notebook. I used to log everything. Her gestures, her heart rate, her words. But lately, my notes have changed. They're not mine anymore. My handwriting's the same, but the phrasing is foreign. Pulse aligns with seventh tether. Blood no longer evaporates. See spiral absorption. Eyes equals mirrors. Skin equals gate. 0-100 is not midnight. It's arrival. That last line is circled 10 times. I tried writing something different. Anything normal. A shopping list. An apology. My own name. But the pen kept writing one word. 0. Over and over. Until the paper bled. Academic discussions in cognitive temporal inversion suggest that time may not always flow forward in high anomaly spaces. In simpler terms, the future bleeds backward. So maybe this has already happened. Maybe we're just catching up to the moment we were always destined to forget. Late in the afternoon, I felt something brush my shoulder. No one was there. But when I turned around, I saw it. A door. Not in the wall. On the wall. Drawn in charcoal. Or soot. Or something darker. the outline of a tall, narrow frame, and inside it, the number 0, not spray painted, not scratched, grown, like the wall had been pregnant with it. I don't know why I touched it, but I did. It was warm and wet, and then I heard her voice, not in my ears, not even in my mind. It came from everywhere. You already know what happens next. And I did. I just didn't want to. Back at Site 231. The alarms stayed off. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. You get used to the background noise, the footsteps, the buzz of cameras adjusting, the distant hum of machines doing things you don't want explained. But now, nothing. No footsteps. No guards. No voices. Just that hum again. Louder. More alive. I passed the mirror in the security hall. I didn't see myself. I saw the girl. Only, not as she was. As she is. Hair like threads of night sky. Eyes like open doors to places with no gravity. And a stomach swollen with something that moved like it was dreaming. And she said, again, he's watching through your eyes now. Only this time, her mouth didn't move. Mine did. I walked straight to her cell. Nobody stopped me. No checkpoints. No retinal scan. Not even a locked door. They were all open. And that's when it hit me. Everyone else is gone. Not dead. Not missing. Just rewritten. The room smelled like ash and honey. She was sitting on the floor. Barefoot. Dressed in the same tattered gown. Now inked in spirals that pulsed with breath. She looked up at me. And said, "It's time to remember." I stepped inside. And everything changed. Not dramatically. No flash of light. No earthquake. Just understanding. The realization that I've been here before. Not last week. Not last year. Before. Before I was born. Before I had a name. Before I was ever me. She stood, took my hand, and placed it on her stomach. It was cold. And then, burning. The skin beneath was hard. Like glass. Like crystal pulsing with something that wasn't flesh or blood or bone. It spoke through my palm. Not in words. In promises. Old folklore says if you speak the true name of a god, you call its attention. But what they don't tell you, if the god speaks your name first, you never get to leave. She leaned forward and whispered into my ear. Not a warning. Not a curse. A single syllable. A name. Mine. But not the name I use. Not the one on file. The real one. The one he gave me. And that's when I realized. I was never assigned here. I was summoned. They say there's a moment before birth when the soul hesitates. Like it's peeking through a keyhole. Wondering whether it really wants to step into the world. I think that moment is happening now. But the hesitation, it's ours. Not hers. Not his. Ours. I stood in her room with my hand on her belly, still hearing my true name echo through the hollow of my ribs like it had been spoken into the marrow itself. The sound didn't fade, it nested. She looked up at me, soft and slow, as if time was something she could pause and resume like a playlist. And said, "You know what happens next. That's why you're still here." And she was right, because I should have run. I should have screamed or fought or prayed. But I didn't. I stayed, because I finally understood what all the silence was trying to tell me. Procedure 110 Montic wasn't about preventing birth. It was about delaying inevitability. A ritual of interruptions, of distractions, of noise and pain and repetition, just enough to keep the door from opening all the way. But doors don't stay closed forever. They rot, they warp, they forget they were ever meant to stay shut. There's this old concept in chaos theory, sensitive dependence on initial conditions. You know it better as the butterfly effect. The idea that one small act, one tiny shift, can lead to a tsunami. What no one tells you is, some butterflies choose to flap their wings. She took my hand, pressed it to her chest. Her heartbeat was slow, strong, louder than it had ever been before. But it wasn't alone. There were two rhythms now. Perfectly synchronized. One in her, one in me. "I'm tired," she said. The voice was hers, but it came from behind her teeth. Like it had been waiting there for years. "I've held him back for so long. And then she looked at me and asked the question I wasn't ready for. "Do you want to see him?" You'd think I'd say no. That I'd scream or run or pull the emergency override. But I didn't, because in that moment, my fear didn't matter, my curiosity didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was my role in the story. And stories don't end when you run away. They just find someone else to finish them. The lights in the room dimmed. Not from a power failure. From something consuming the light itself. The air thickened. My ears popped. And her belly began to glow. Dim at first, like a lantern buried in snow. Then brighter, sharper, burning through the skin in jagged veins of molten red. And she opened her mouth, not to scream, but to sing, the same melody, only this time, there were words, and every syllable pushed against the seams of reality. The corners of the room curled inward. My vision blurred, then sharpened. I saw stars that didn't belong to this sky. I saw his form, not with eyes, but with understanding. Not a creature, not a king, a pattern, a language that hates silence, a story that cannot be untold, a scream that learned to wear skin. Her voice shook the air. The cameras shattered one by one. My earpiece melted, and still, I stayed. I didn't kneel, I didn't run, I listened, because that's what he wanted. Not obedience, not worship, witness. And when the song ended, when the last breath of that ancient lullaby slipped into the void, she looked at me and said, "Now you carry him too." I fell, or maybe the floor just gave up holding me. Either way, I hit the ground hard, mouth full of iron and dust. My body buzzed with heat and ice. My skin itched from the inside. And then, for one perfect second, there was nothing, no sound, no thought, no fear, just him. And he spoke. Not in language, in revelation. He didn't say what he was. He said why. I am what the world deserves after forgetting how to bleed. And I believed him, because I looked up, and saw myself in her eyes. Not reflected, growing, changing, a face I didn't recognize, but fit. There's an old belief, passed down by desert mystics, that the apocalypse doesn't arrive all at once. It's born, and it grows. And it smiles. That's when the alarms returned. Late, futile, a final reflex. The speakers blared. Level 5 containment breach. All personnel evacuate immediately. But there was no one left to evacuate. Just me, and her, and him. Waiting, patient, eternal. She lay back on the cot. Breathing steady, eyes closed, a peaceful smile on her lips. And whispered, "It begins tomorrow." They finally found me 13 hours later. Collapsed in the hallway outside SCP-231-7's chamber. Curled into a fetal position, whispering the melody she sang on loop. My mouth was dry, my throat raw. I didn't even know I was speaking. They took me to Medical Bay C. Hooked up IVs, ran scans. Didn't find anything wrong, except I no longer cast a shadow. They didn't talk about that part. Didn't even record it in the chart. They kept calling it dehydration-induced delirium. But no one would meet my eyes. Even the nurse that changed my IV looked down when she adjusted the flow. "You're lucky," she whispered once. I asked her why. She just said, "She let you leave." I wasn't allowed back into the containment wing. Level 3 lockdown. No entry, no information, no status updates. They didn't even say her name anymore. Not 231-7. Not the girl. Just, subject. Like even uttering a number might finish the countdown. Speaking of numbers, I hadn't heard one in days. Not from her. Not in my dreams. Not in my teeth. Just silence. And the silence was worse. Because it wasn't empty. It was watching. There's a strange thing that happens when you stare at static long enough. Your brain tries to find patterns. Faces, shapes, familiar signals in the noise. That's what my sleep became. Static, white noise nightmares full of unblinking eyes and doorways that breathe. Every dream started with me walking through her chamber door, and ended with me giving birth to something I couldn't see, but knew wore my voice. Academic debate often dismisses the concept of metaphysical infection. The idea that exposure to certain thoughts, certain entities, can corrupt reality at a conceptual level. But those debates never included her. Because after seeing her, you don't dream in first person anymore. You dream as a location, a vessel, a point of arrival. Eventually, they let me leave the site. Or, more likely, they needed me to. Because I was a liability now. I was marked, tainted, contagious. I tried going home, but home wasn't mine anymore. My apartment smelled like copper and rain. My reflection still didn't follow my movements. And every wall had just barely noticeable cracks, like something inside the building was pushing out. I stayed 3 nights. On the 4th, I left. I drove. No direction. Just away. But you can't escape a story once it's wrapped itself around your spine. I pulled over in the middle of nowhere, empty desert road. Moon overhead, wind whispering secrets into the asphalt. And I heard her, from the passenger seat, not physically, not exactly, just there, breathing, present. She said, "He's not born yet, but he's begun." I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, but not from fear, from anticipation. Because the worst part, I missed it. The hum, the weight, the knowing. It was quiet now, too quiet, and all I could think was, we're too late. A week passed, maybe 2. Time's weird now. Days blur, clocks stutter, technology glitches when I touch it. Phones die, lights flicker, screens distort and show images that feel familiar but never happened. One day I looked at the sky, and I swear it blinked. Not the sun, the sky. I went back to site 231. Or tried to. There's nothing there now, just an empty field. No buildings, no fence, no foundation, just weeds, silence, and the faint smell of ash. And at the center, a single chair, facing east, with her hospital gown draped across it. And something scrawled on the ground in salt. He dreams in daylight now. You ever hear cicadas scream at night, only to go silent the moment you open the door? That's how it feels now. Like reality is holding its breath. Like we're living in the moment right before the contraction hits. The universe isn't expanding anymore. It's bracing. I saw a boy on the side of the road today. 7 or 8. Dark hair. Smiling. He waved at me as I passed. And when I looked in the rearview mirror, he was gone. But the mirror wasn't empty. It showed a hallway, flickering lights, and her, smiling, waiting. Because this story, it's not ending, it's crowning. And when it finally breaks through, we won't scream, we'll just understand. The first reported anomaly happened in Kansas. A local hospital. Nothing special, nothing fancy. A nurse on the night shift heard a baby crying in the NICU. Except all the infants were accounted for. And none of them were crying. The sound came from inside the walls. The staff called it a shared auditory hallucination. 3 days later, the hospital collapsed into a sinkhole that didn't exist on geological surveys. No survivors, no evidence, just a note carved into the steel bed frame of the only undamaged incubator. He doesn't need a mother anymore. I stopped checking the news. It doesn't help. The reports are too sanitized. Too unsure. Earthquake clusters in places that don't get earthquakes. Waves of silence moving across entire towns. Birds flying in perfect, spiraling formations, and then dropping dead midair. No one says it out loud. But we all feel it. He's not just coming. He's here. You know that feeling when someone's watching you, but you can't prove it. Now imagine that sensation, never turning off. Even when you close your eyes. Even when you sleep. Especially when you sleep. Because sleep isn't rest anymore. It's exposure. I lie down, and suddenly I'm in his world. Walking corridors made of ribcages and sorrow. Hearing lullabies that bend light. Feeling welcomed. I saw her again 2 nights ago. Not in a dream. Not in memory. In my room. Sitting at the foot of my bed. Smiling. Not older. Not younger. Just closer. She looked at me with those deep, hollow eyes and said, "You should have let me finish the song." I tried to speak. I really did. But my throat was locked. Dry. full of something warm and metallic. I opened my mouth and only one thing came out. 0. And then she was gone. But the shape of her stayed. Like a burn on the sheets. Here's a bizarre science fact I read once. Jellyfish don't technically age. Some species can revert to earlier stages of life. Essentially starting over. Immortal. Unfinished. That's what he is. Not a baby. Not a god. Something in between. Something that hasn't chosen a shape yet. Something waiting to begin. Academic texts often debate the idea of ontological incubation, when a concept or entity exists. But only halfway, half-formed in reality's womb. It warps everything around it. Bends physics. Changes cause and effect. That's happening now. You've seen it, haven't you? You've felt it. The strange déjà vu that feels more like premonition. The numbers you see repeating everywhere. 0, 100, 7, 1, 6. The humming in your appliances. The dream you can't remember but still fear. He's everywhere. Because he's nowhere. And nowhere is the safest place to hide. I've started writing with my non-dominant hand. Not because I want to. Because my dominant hand keeps twitching. Keeps trying to draw spirals. Keeps tracing something on my own skin while I sleep. One morning, I woke up with a bruise in the shape of a crown over my heart. And it wasn't there the next day. But the impression was. Like a kiss made of memory. I called someone from my old team. The last one still answering his phone. He didn't say, hello. Just whispered, he's in the satellites now. Then hung up. And I haven't been able to make a single outgoing call since. I keep trying to leave messages for myself. Little notes, scattered across my apartment. But every time I check back, they've changed. I wrote, she is the lock. Now it reads, you are the key. And beneath it, something new was added in handwriting that isn't mine. Your shape fits the gate. You ever stand at the edge of a cliff and feel the pull? That invisible nudge that whispers, jump. Now imagine that voice knows your name. Knows your history. Knows what you're afraid of becoming. That's what it's like to be noticed by him. Not possessed. Not chosen. Just seen. And once you've been seen, you don't belong to yourself anymore. I visited my childhood home today. Or, at least, I thought I did. It was gone, replaced with a field of pale grass swaying in breathless wind. And in the middle, a rocking chair. Empty, still moving, like someone had just left. On the chair was a card. Handwritten, my name on the front. Inside, he forgives you. And beneath that, she's in labor. I don't know what day it is anymore. The clocks are gone. The sun rises, but never in the same place. The moon splits some nights into 3 slivers that orbit each other like knives circling a throat. And no one notices. Or maybe they do, and they just choose not to see it. I'm starting to understand. That was always the choice. See, or don't. And now, I can't stop seeing. Last night, I felt the contractions. Not metaphorically, not as some dream symbol. I felt them, tearing through the seams of the world like a zipper being pulled open from the inside. Buildings shivered, skies flickered, and beneath it all, her heartbeat, not just in my head. In everything. I found myself back at Site 231. Not physically. Physically I never left the motel room outside a gas station whose staff haven't spoken since Tuesday. But my soul, it's been pacing those halls for days. She's there, still waiting, still pregnant, still smiling like a secret halfway told. And the walls, they bleed light now, not red, white, the kind that casts no shadow and tells no lies. She spoke again, lying on the cot, gown soaked through, veins glowing with movement. Her eyes didn't blink, just stared at the ceiling as if she were watching it dissolve. He's tired of waiting, she said, so he'll arrive all at once. Old wisdom says labor is the process of the body breaking to make room for life. But no one asks what reality breaks to make room for him. Because this isn't birth. This is eruption. This is the scream the universe tried to stifle. Academic philosophers once argued that if the end of everything was perceived as birth, it would still feel like creation. The Scarlet King doesn't destroy our world. He rewrites it. And this is his first sentence. I stepped into her room one last time. I don't remember how I got in. I don't think I walked. She was glowing. Every breath puffed out a spiral of light that dissolved before hitting the floor. She looked at me, tears running sideways down her face, and said, "You need to see him first." She reached out, placed my hand over her stomach again. This time, no heartbeat, no kicks, just emptiness, a vacuum wrapped in skin, a silence that screamed, and beneath my fingers, I felt my own name, spoken through flesh, reflected back at me by a being that shouldn't know how to recognize. But it does. She began to tremble. The walls began to split, not crack. Split, like pages turning in stone. The alarms didn't sound. Nothing did. Because sound doesn't work at that frequency. It's all vibration now. All knowing. I asked her what he looked like. I don't know why. I think part of me still needed the illusion of control. She didn't answer with words. She just turned her head, met my gaze, and whispered, "He wears your face, just softer." And I saw him, for the first time, not fully, not completely, but enough. A face like mine, eyes like hers, skin that shimmered with possibility. A child without a cry, a god without a crown, a beginning before beginnings. And he knew me. In that single moment, I felt everything I'd ever done pressed against the inside of my skull like fingerprints on glass. And he forgave me. And then he claimed me. I didn't resist. I think I smiled. And as the room began to collapse inward, walls folding, floor stretching, lights twisting into loops of language, I held her hand. Not out of love, not out of duty, out of recognition. She wasn't just a girl. She was a threshold. And I was the last person to walk through her. And the last thing she ever said was, "Tell them, it's already too late." The world went silent, and stayed that way. But it wasn't empty. It was full of something new. Something watching, something growing. And now I walk through your cities, your homes, your thoughts. Because I'm no longer me. I'm the story you weren't supposed to hear. I'm the melody that won't stop humming in the wires behind your walls. I'm the whisper inside your reflection. And he's with me, in every breath, in every pause, in every zero. So, if you're still here, still breathing, still watching from whatever safe little pocket of night you call home, thank you. But let's be honest, something's changed now, hasn't it? You feel it, don't you? That slight pressure behind your eyes. The static in your headphones. That moment earlier tonight where you swore the shadows on your wall moved. Just a little. You see, this wasn't just a story about a girl locked in a room. It wasn't about rituals or countdowns or even the Scarlet King. It was about you. About what happens when you look too closely at the places the world keeps hidden. And what looks back. Because she was never meant to keep him out forever. She was just the pause between heartbeats. A breath held in a universe too scared to exhale. But now the breath is gone. The silence is broken, and he's here, not as a monster, not as a god, but as the whisper behind your thoughts when everything else goes quiet. So, if the lights flicker tonight, don't panic. If you dream in spirals, don't resist. If you hear humming in a room that should be empty, just listen, because now you understand the truth. She didn't give birth to the end. She gave birth to a beginning. And the next chapter, it's already writing you. Now, take a deep breath. Slow it all down. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let the dark curl around you like a blanket from something that remembers your name. And if you start to hear the counting again, don't run, don't scream, just whisper back, 0.